be honest, talent acquisition has been pummeled left and right in the last few years after what seemed like glory heydays post-COVID to now amazing talent professionals leaving the market because they're really struggling to find work. What if there's an alternative route, not just in talent acquisition, but in the wider HR function? And then more specifically, how do you get to that? What's the steps you can take? What's the transferable skills that you can bring forward? How do you start that process of expanding out your knowledge? Here is what you've got coming up in this episode.
I think the challenge we face now is that hiring volumes are down. The amount that one person can deliver in terms of volume of recruitment, whether it's volume recruitment or it's exec recruitment, doesn't really matter, has been increased enormously because the technology that takes away a lot of the administration has come in and is there. We continue to expect more from our recruiters. So you can become a really good recruiter. But once you get to TA manager, team lead, where do you go from there? So if you're involved in the budget planning process that goes on typically September, October, you can start to set expectations and so on. So, and that gives it's a different value add in terms of your baseline role as a TA manager, starting to influence the business and allowing it to make decisions, which allows you to execute. So, and that starts to get us out of just that TA operational delivery niche, which is the critical thing, I think.
Take it from someone who's actually done it, been there, done that, well and truly worn a t-shirt. So please pay attention, grab your notepad, pen, notes on your phone, whatever, especially if this is something you're particularly interested in, is leaving not just the talent acquisition, but towards the wider HR function and talent function. Doesn't mean you leave it all together, but it means bringing those skills in to obviously the wider function of your business. Thanks so much for joining. Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by a seasoned talent and people leader with a deep experience in global recruitment and talent strategy. He currently serves as the head of talent at the team at Uber, where he leads talent initiatives for a fast-growing digital business. But throughout his career, he has built and scaled world-class hiring teams, driven innovative talent practices, and been recognized as a core member of the Recruitment Leaders 100 and featured in the T100 list. Reflecting on his influence in the field of talent acquisition and HR leadership, and with his expansive career under his belt, we're going to explore how talent acquisition has evolved over the years, and more specifically, how, for those interested in doing so, can branch further into the wider HR function. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, Head of Talent Management, Charlie St Aubyn. So thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, Eden. Thanks for inviting me.
I appreciate it. And but from my side, I'm very keen to dive into this for a number of reasons, for sure. But I do feel like it's one of those topics that in talent, a lot of people get here by accident, and then they kind of get stuck a little bit, and they're like, well, where can I go from here? And I'm hoping we're going to shed a little bit of light that you don't have to just sit in talent, even though you're there today, you can branch out. But before we get into that, I just want to kind of start with a different question. From your perspective, looking forward, specifically in recruitment in talent profession, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge that we're going to have to overcome in the next 3 years?
I think the TA function, talent acquisition function, is changing very rapidly. Probably as fast as at any time since the whole in-house function came about some years back. And I mean, obviously everybody's talking about AI, but what does that mean? The shape of recruiters' roles, talent acquisition partners' roles, is going to change because we will hopefully automate all the administrative sides of the process, and we as recruiters can really add value. But it's going to require a different approach, a different skill set. We're certainly seeing changes in the market. What companies are looking for from their in-house recruiters and their TA leaders, and that's I think we'll see more change in the next 3 years than we have done in the last probably 10 or 15.
I mean, looking back into your career as well, because I mean, you've had a very expansive career. I mean, looking back at those changes that were already taking place, do you feel like this is the biggest shift that we're seeing, or has there been another point in your career that where you've gone, well, that's completely different to what it was last year and vice versa?
Oh, I think no. I mean, I think there've been a number of significant shifts over the years. I mean, I started in agency and exec search in the late '90s, just after the internet arrived. I'm that old. Um, the major, and we went through the dot-com rise and crash in at the beginning of the 2000s. Then LinkedIn came along. And LinkedIn massively changed everything. It's suddenly you could disintermediate the agencies who had built their business on the basis of their database and having access to it. And suddenly that meant that the whole in-house function came about. And that, I mean, I guess that took 10, 12 years to really establish itself up. Then we had the financial crisis, which was another reset. Then clearly the world boomed, and then COVID came along, and suddenly we were all working remote, or we moved away from face-to-face interviewing into video interviewing, which is basically absolutely standard now. But I mean, you only have to think back 6 years. We did hardly any video interviewing. So there've been a whole range of new things coming, but I think, yeah, I mean, AI is a big one. I mean, I guess it's up there with the arrival of the internet. And the arrival of LinkedIn, I think.
Where do you stand on AI sourcing? And I kind of put a pretense to this, is that I saw a post, clearly it's a company pitching their sourcing system for recruiters. And, I'm in the camp, and I'll put my opinion out there.
Yeah.
I don't believe in it personally. I think it can help create a shortlist, but I look at profiles in such a different way, depending on the business, the stakeholder, the things they tell me that a job description cannot, and simply matching spec to LinkedIn profile doesn't tell you. There's these nuances you have to be mindful. So I'm curious from your experience where you stand on it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I was sort of traditionally trained in executive search as a researcher initially, so I came from that background, and then that became, once we had LinkedIn and moved in-house, that became almost the default approach from the days of just posting an ad and hoping that people would apply. I guess the jury's definitely out. Ultimately, it depends where the candidate pendulum is. I mean, we know we went from the 2010s when there were lots of roles and not enough candidates, and you had to work really hard and to source candidates, to post-COVID, and 22, and certainly the tech industry where I've largely been, where suddenly there's huge numbers of, and how do you manage volumes of candidates? So that pendulum swims back and forth. To me, I think AI sourcing is still in its infancy, and let's separate it from AI screening. Funny enough, we are looking at it at the moment. We know that LinkedIn has had the best sourcing capability, pretty much, when enabled by a human. LinkedIn Recruiter, for all its faults, still remains a massively powerful tool and a massively
annoyingly
successful
costly
tool.
one, but it is costly for a reason. So
yeah, absolutely,
you can't argue against it, unfortunately.
No. Completely. They're now trying to use more and more AI within LinkedIn Recruiter, and I think the jury's very much out on how effective that is. Certainly, I'm hearing very mixed stories as to whether it works or not. LinkedIn's not had a particularly good track record of upgrading, but what it does basically as its core product. Clearly, there are things like Juicebox and MetaView coming along, who are, and interestingly, we happen to be looking at those at the moment. I've got a demo from Juicebox tomorrow. So we're looking at new alternative approaches. Ultimately, it's how do we reach people? How do we reach the right people? And seeing whether, and if an AI tool can help us do that, then we'll use it. If it's surfacing candidates that we might not think of, that's great. And is it surfacing the right candidates? Don't know. I think your point about a well-trained researcher, recruiter who knows what they're looking for. I mean, we had days of when the people were doing X-raying and really smart Boolean search, and there were some really, really smart sources out there doing some brilliant work, particularly in the US, where it's very much a sort of standalone profession. But yeah, will AI get there? Probably. Will it be? I'm more skeptical about how good it will be at doing assessment and selection. I think it'll be good at surfacing candidates that we might not have thought of. But overall, yeah, it's very early days.
The reason I bring that forward anyways is, throughout all these events that you've seen throughout your career, the fundamental element of what a good talent professional is, has that changed dramatically, or do you still feel that the core fundamentals of what our profession still remains, I guess?
That's a really good question. No, I think the fundamentals remain the same. I think somebody who was a good agency recruiter in the late 1990s, which I know is a lifetime away now for most people, would still be a good recruiter today, because ultimately it's about, do you understand your hiring manager or your customer and their environment? Do you understand what the hiring manager is looking for and can challenge that and nail that down? Can you turn that into a brief that you can then use to, first of all, identify the right candidate, and then sell the opportunity to the candidate, because we know it's very much a two-way process. And then do you have the customer service skills to manage the candidate and the hiring manager and those involved through the process in the most frictionless way, while applying a rigorous and valid assessment process to it? And then can you close a candidate? Because at the end of the day, accepting a job is an emotional thing as much as it is buying a house or whatever. I always used to say to people, it's the only product you buy that can decide at the till that it doesn't want to go home with you.
It can change its mind even after the contract's signed,
Absolutely.
even on the first working day.
Yeah,
you've got to be thick-skinned on this one.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
with obviously, again, kind of stepping out of just the TA function itself, you used the phrase before we started recording, you used the phrase that TA is creating the next generation of HR leaders, like the function itself.
Yeah.
Why do you ultimately believe that?
So I think the part of the challenge is that, given where we are from a global economic perspective, a business perspective today, one of the challenges that we face is historically you started as a researcher or a junior recruiter, you became a more senior one, you became a TA manager, which is basically a player coach, and then eventually you became a head of TA, and then possibly a director of TA, and even a VP. And that might be within a sector or a country or whatever. So there was a career path. The challenge, and there were enough roles around and enough companies with those sorts of vacancies to be able to do that, whether you did it within one company or you moved from company to company. I think the challenge we face now is that hiring volumes are down. The amount that one person can deliver in terms of volume of recruitment, whether it's volume recruitment or it's exec recruitment, doesn't really matter, has been increased enormously because the technology that takes away a lot of the administration has come in and is there. And we continue to expect more from our recruiters. So you can become a really good recruiter, but once you get to TA manager, team lead, where do you go from there? There are fewer and fewer. Companies don't want to pay for somebody simply to do a strategic head of TA role. Certainly medium-sized companies. Bigger companies, yes, they've still got the scope to do it. But if you're hiring 40, 60 roles a year per recruiter, maybe you're hiring 120, 240 roles as a company, do you really need something more than a TA manager at the moment? So I think there's a blocker on where recruiters can go. And increasingly, we're finding that heads of HR, CPOs, CHROs are looking for someone who can do cover TA, but also do other stuff within the HR function in order to justify having somebody at a more senior level that can bring that strategic or even tactically planned focus to TA. And TA is moving fast, and you need someone who can step back and be objective and plan where we're going, rather than just operational delivery and a bit of people management. So I think there's a gap that's beginning to build up, and we know that an awful lot the people who find it hardest to find jobs post 22 have been those TA managers, heads of TA in mid-sized roles, sitting at the sort of 75, 80k in sterling mark, because those jobs have gone. So I think we need people to we need to find a route for great recruiters, great TA managers. Where do they go from here? Equally, HR as a function is changing. So the automation of much of HR operations. So AI is hammering that, which is a good thing. Because to be honest, administrative process HR is basically what it is. You can automate that, and we're seeing that disappear. So my company, we don't have a head of HR operations because we don't need that. HR operations, in my view, and it's slightly controversial, is I think will become focused primarily on employees' relations. So dealing with the human problems that come up. Similarly, you'll have HR business partners who sit as part of the leadership teams of divisions or functions who work with that and then execute either directly or through centers of excellence. And I see the talent function as really something where we can bring people in from a TA background, from an L&D background, performance management, engagement, those sides, who are actually going to be the HR more generalist in HR terms than many of the other specialist HR areas, and therefore bring a really strong skill set, and should, I think, challenge to be the next generation of HRDs and CHROs, because I think talent is ultimately where it's at. Reward and payroll are process. Ops is primarily process. Yes, you need an ER function. Business partnering is business partnering, but ultimately I think most good TA people are naturally business partners anyway. They work with hiring managers. They understand how the business works. They provide a consultancy service to their hiring managers and their leaders about recruitment. So stepping into, if they can build a knowledge of the wider HR functions and the different specialism within that, most TA people bring that skill set automatically.
We want to touch upon that lead part, because I imagine that people listening to you now thinking, I'm in that category, right? Maybe they're employed, not employed, but they're in that category thinking, what is the next thing? I can't really see a clear route anymore. And maybe HR is a function that they're kind of in, kind of not in, depending on what their exposure has been. What would you say is kind of the mindset shift? Well, that's a mouthful. A mindset shift that they might need to have to take it out of, and again, I do feel like recruitment is quite a process-driven function. You've got a task, go deliver said task. And I do find in HR there is a little bit more of a grey area in some of the functions that they have around, where it's not as clear cut as go do that. Some will, some I don't necessarily think do. Like the business partner isn't as clear cut as you say payroll and ops, for example. So is there a shift that we need to have to think more in terms of the HR functions?
I think so. I mean, there will be some people who want to do TA and nothing but TA, and maybe do it on a move from a UK focus to a European focus to a global focus. Some people will want to move up the levels and start doing more junior positions and end up doing exec board level type recruitment, and that's fine. Other people will want to become more T-shaped and move out, and that's up to individuals to decide. Well, what do I want? Are they talking to their HR colleagues? Do they understand what's involved? Because the different parts of HR are very different. A lot of HR generalists historically have not liked recruitment for whatever reason. it's hard. We sometimes forget how hard recruitment is, and we get good at it, and we simply take it for granted. But yeah, from a
Highs
mindset
are
shift,
high and the lows are low. That's the best way to explain it in recruitment.
absolutely. Absolutely. Although, frankly, you wouldn't get me do unionized employer relations at any price. I think it's what does an individual want? And like anything, that's about going out and talking to people and finding out, well, what's involved? Is this of interest? And I think we need to be really clear that talent is not TA. It's interesting as time goes forward that we're seeing more and more roles advertised as head of talent, which is just basically a head of TA role. So what is in talent? And therefore, how do you get into that? How do you start to spread your wings? I think generally a lot of people start to get more involved early in the planning process. So strategic workforce planning, critical part of what we do. More business partnering, as in TA business partnering. So are we involved in that? Are we involved in the budget and headcount planning process at the start of the year? So any good TA leader will want to be part of that and be giving advice and guidance. Many a TA leader has walked into a new job or a new company and been faced by, right, we want to hire 120 people in Q1, and you've got 1.5 recruiters. And how many do you want to hire in Q2 and Q3 and Q4? Oh, no, none. We just need them all on the 1st of January. So if you're involved in the budget planning process that goes on typically September, October, you can start to set expectations and so on. So, and that gives it's a different value add in terms of your baseline role as a TA manager, starting to influence the business and allowing it to make decisions, which allows you to execute. So, and that starts to get us out of just that TA operational delivery niche, which is the critical thing, I think.
Do you feel that many companies are receptive to, for example, if you've got a business of 20 recruiters or 10 recruiters or whatever, and you've got 3 or 4 of them asking for that sort of impact and responsibility, does that not start taking away from what the day-to-day role of what you're employed to do is?
No, I don't think so. I think it adds it significantly to the capability because it helps build the relationship and the credibility between the recruiter and their senior hiring managers. And often if they're working with an HR manager or an HR BP, they are bringing that expertise on what is possible. Let's not set ourselves up to fail. So, and that's starting to understand capacity. So do we know how many roles can a recruiter in your particular company, in your particular sector, sensibly deliver and deliver well? We can always overstretch our recruiters, but we know that what happens is that tends to extend timelines because they are spread across too many roles. And the business will always ask for more. But the business is actually pretty good if you go to them and say, okay, you want 12 people in Q1, we can do that. If you want 12 people on the 1st of January, we can't do that. And then your friends are often finance who are not actually that keen on having all the headcount loads at the start of the year and would rather smooth things out over the year. And then obviously we have to remember there's going to be natural turnover and attrition as well. So you have to add those numbers in. So, and this is sort of strategic workforce planning 101. And if you go in having thought about it and discussing it with your HRBP and with their leaders who are also your stakeholders, then suddenly you are elevated. And this is useful business information. This allows them to make sensible business decisions to run their function more effectively. It doesn't take a huge amount of time. But if you built the relationship with your stakeholders, they will be keen to have your input into this. And it might be 20 minutes, the actual conversation with a couple of hours prep beforehand. But it's so much easier if you do that right up front at the start of the budget period. And I did it by simply putting my hand up and saying, listen, involve me in the budget planning process. Share with me the numbers and I can tell you what we can do and what we can't do. It also allows me to tell you whether we have enough recruiters. Can we do it all in-house? How does our model look? Do we need to get some contractors in? Do we need to go to agencies? I can start doing all that planning rather than everything being a panic when you come to me on the 31st of December and say, great, I need 15 new people by the end of January.
Well, I guess you're becoming more proactive.
Yeah, be
proactive
proactive
instead of reactive to it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I speak to a lot of people, not just for the podcast, but obviously speaking to talent professionals in general. And there is this willingness to want to learn more, but also kind of like this fear of the unknown of I am a recruiter, what I do, it's what I specialize in. And then like this unknown of this other world around the function. I mean, you just said it to yourself. You put your hand up and said, I want to learn. I want to be involved. Teach me with that. And some people will absolutely do it. They don't care. They're like, yeah, let's go for it. But other people, I think, are a little bit more cautious still of like where the boundaries, what can I do, what I can't do in the current company. So for those types of people, what's the just a nice, easy way, I guess, to start the process of trying to expand your knowledge further?
Yeah, I mean, without being too daft about it, know your enemy. So in the old days, it was early doors. Internal TA was stuck in a corner away from the rest of HR. But I think for those sorts of people, go and learn about HR. There are books, there are courses, there are online courses. If you want to go the whole hog, go and do a CIPD course. Go and do a master's. I did evening classes to get a master's because once I knew about it, and that's where I wanted to go. I'm not saying anybody needs to do that, but the more you know about it's like anything else. The more you know about it, the more you can go, okay, well, I see how that fits. Then you're armed with the information to start to ask people and to work out, okay, what do I need to do if I want to go in that direction? So I think understanding what's involved and the value that each area brings and how it all fits together, which you can do entirely in your own time, is a really good starting point. And then you're starting to talk, it's like working with any other stakeholder. You're starting to talk in their language about their problems. And you build your credibility and they'll go, well, hang on, okay. You might have been a recruiter, but you clearly know quite a bit about being an HR business partner. And then the other thing is don't underestimate the skill set that we as recruiters bring. I think this is really important. Do your self-analysis, but in typical terms, I mean, we're very strong project managers. We're good people readers. We're good researchers and analysts. We go out and learn about the business, so we understand what makes a business tick. We have a view of pretty much the whole business, depending on how specialist we are. So if we're a generalist recruiter working in a small company, we will know far more about the business than the majority of people do. We've got those stakeholder management skills. We know how to build relationships. We can build relationships very quickly with candidates, for instance. We have influencing skills. How do we closing an offer? Somebody who's good at closing offer has really good influencing skills because we know it's not just shove an amount of money in front of somebody and hope for the best. There's way more to it than that. All of that skill set are absolutely things that are required in other parts of the HR function. So you bring 98% of the soft skills required. Particularly, as going back to what I was talking about earlier, in my opinion, as we move away from functional process-based HR into influencing, leading, guiding, directing, strategic, relationship-based HR, where our job in HR is to make the business better through supporting our people and helping them become better. So we have the skill set. We might not have the knowledge. You can pick up the knowledge quickly. And then if you do nothing until that point, that's great. You can then, at that stage, you can then move forward and start to say, well, listen, actually, I think I could possibly help here.
I think the biggest takeaway there is just one, the transferable skills for sure. Until you start listening, until you start understanding, actually, I do have a lot of the skills that they're looking for. And if it's an area of particular interest, there's nothing stopping you from doing the free courses. And then if you like it, you go into the more, the costly or the costly, the paid courses or however you want to get accredited. And then you start, as you say, bringing that knowledge in house whilst doing it. You start need to, action what you're learning. Where do you see it go wrong? Where's there a misalignment from experience where maybe you didn't anticipate something in the HR side, or maybe you've seen it with peers or colleagues or whoever, friends, where there's just been a misalignment into expectations or I guess the function itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is people go, well, you do recruitment,
Oh, pain.
and that's it. But what do you know about HR? You do recruitment like it's not part of HR. So
Almost like a throwing away, like that's not your function. Like
yeah, it's not your function.
what do you know about
Um,
it?
and again, it comes back to this analysis of the skill set. So if you start to think about, well, we are generally involved in strategic workforce planning, headcount planning, whatever you want to call it, even if it's at a very, very limited level of sitting down with your key stakeholders once a quarter saying, how many people are you going to hire this quarter? We are involved in compensation and benefits because we need to understand how sales comp schemes in order that we can sell those to salespeople. We know about salary levels. We know about contracts because we do offer letters. We know about notice periods. So and people start to go, but you know nothing about HR. So hence, I think the key thing is really get your HR colleagues on side. Wear the cloak of HR. So be part of HR. Make sure that people see you as an HR person first and a TA recruiter person second. If you simply sit there with your recruiter hat on going, I want to do some HR, people, it's like anything else. How do you move laterally or diagonally in any role? Well, you've always been a salesperson. Why will we put you in pre-sales or solutions? You only know how to do direct sales. You don't understand implementation at all. So it's exactly the same challenge. So you need to be able to articulate, learn and B, then articulate your broader knowledge and look for opportunities to help out and or stick your hand up and ask, I'd like to be involved in that because I think I could bring a perspective. If you sit there going, right, make me an HRBP, guess what? It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And it is like slightly changing function or changing shape. It's much easier to do it in the company you're in rather than trying to apply for an HR or HR assistant or HR manager job in another company.
Yeah, that one I can see. It's like any change in function. If you've got a business that you like and they can support you, always try it there. And then you can always see, is it really the right move for me? It's less of a risk for you to do it in an existing business. Do you think in some way expanding out of just talent acquisition and looking at wider HR element and expanding into that field more and being more receptive to HR, do you think that future-proofs the function of talent or someone's profession in talent to some degree?
I think so. I mean, if the number of people who I've spoken to over the last couple of years who say, listen, I'm in TA, I want to go, I don't think I've got anywhere to go. I'm interested in getting into broader talent.
Yeah.
I think you've done this, Charlie. How did you do it? That's why we're here today. People are not, I mean, TA folks are not daft. They see there is limited headroom and therefore want to branch out into related areas. And I think as we see the whole HR function change, as all functions will change with the arrival of AI over the next 3 to 5 years, we've got to adapt. What do we bring? Do we bring process? And I mean, even as a talent leader, my role is changing. Today I have HRIS and data analytics sit underneath me, and we're also driving AI across the entire HR function, not just looking at what we do in TA. 18 months ago, I knew about AI, but it was more machine learning and it was parsing of CVs and stuff like that. And I've had to learn and radically change my knowledge base in order to adapt and be relevant in that scenario. So I think, the simple answer is yes, we have to change. There's always going to be roles for junior, mid-level, senior recruiters, and some will end up just doing senior exec search, working in-house or for a search firm or whatever, and great, all power to them. But I think the in-house function is going to change significantly.
Final question. Do you think it will change back? Do you think we will see companies hiring en masse as we once were 4 or 5 years ago? Because again, my career is nowhere near as expansive as yours, but in 12 years, I've gone through 2 very large hiring waves and 2 very quiet hiring periods. And that's just in those 12 years. So do you see it coming back to something that we were once with, but now obviously with AI on top?
I don't think we ever go backwards. I think we go forwards in different ways. That's not supposed to be a smart answer. Will we get to the point where the economies are booming and we're hiring flat out because companies are growing? Absolutely, because that's the global economic cycle. What the timings are on that, if I knew, I would be investing in companies now. But sadly, that doesn't work that way. Very good at 2020 hindsight. The pendulum swings back and forth. I'm not one of those that sits here going, you know what, AI is going to remove people out of the workplace in vast numbers forever. We were all told when the internet came along that it would all give us lots more leisure time. We were all told when LinkedIn came along that no one would need agencies anymore. Nothing is ever absolute. There will always be more jobs for people because, but they'll just be different. We're all, you're the same as me. We're recruiting for jobs today that didn't exist 3 years ago. We're recruiting for jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago. But some jobs we're recruiting for have been around since the dawn of time. So I think it will change. Will we go back to 2017, 2018 in terms of volume? Maybe. There was a big boom in the late 90s, in the run up to year 2000, all that stuff, and then that all went down, and then it was tough through the early 2000s, and then it picked up again, and then we had the financial crisis. It comes and it goes.
The reason I say that is I don't want someone listening, and people who are listening now, to think that you have to make this transition to future-proof your career, but it's kind of like these elements of if you're unsure of where you want to go for TA, I think this is a perfect example to explain how transferable the skills are, and there is a bigger world out there, but in the same breath, and the market's returned, and there's both options
people
still
do change, and after the financial crisis in 2009-10, that took out huge swathes of in-house recruiters. And a lot of people went off and did other things. And then the market came back sort of 2013, 2014. We've lost a lot of very good people out of the industry in the last couple of years. And we know that the area remains, certain parts of TA remain really hard to get a job in. And people go off and do other things. But even those who are still in the game know that we all have to adapt and change all the time. Will the numbers go up? I think so. Will the roles change? Absolutely. And therefore, will there be a standalone recruiter doing just recruitment in the future? I think so. Yeah. But will the career path, which leads us back to where we started, remain the same? Absolutely not.
I appreciate that, Charlie, and thank you so much for jumping on. And if anyone wants to pick up this conversation further with you, where would be the best place that they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can contact me directly at charles.staubyn@uberall.com. Very happy to chat to people. Thanks so much for having me. It's been really interesting. Change is a constant, as they say.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, Eden.
Bye.